Hi there, folks. Welcome back to the WP-Tonic Roundtable Show. Every Friday at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time, we have a WordPress posse join me, and we have just a really good guess about anything to do with WordPress or anything in general that the conversation goes down. This is episode 241. I'm going to let my guests quickly introduce themselves, and let's start with ladies first, as always. Let's start with a real champion of the show, Sally.
Good morning. I am Sally Getch. My business is WP Fangirl. I build websites for small businesses and nonprofits, and I'm the organizer of the East Bay WordPress meetup in Oakland, California.
We've got two Johns on the show, so I'm going to call our guest JJ. So, JJ, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is John Jacoby. I'm the project lead for BuddyPress, bbPress. Generally, try not to be too crabby on Twitter and GitHub at JJJ, and I am excited to be here today. This will be fun. I don't know that I may be in the early days, but I don't think that I've ever been on the show. So I'm excited to hang out.
Have you got any alcohol with you? Because you might need it.
I've got some in the fridge. Usually on the Tavern podcast, I've got a beer just to hang out with Jeff for an hour and a half. Yeah. So
I have noticed that a lot of the panel do start hitting back stuff as this progresses. Actually, JJ, I'm going to let my I'm going to let my former great co-host John introduce himself. Go on, John.
Sure thing. My name's John Locke. The business is Lockdown Design, and that's SEO consultation for established businesses. Onward to Lee.
Yeah, on to Lee Jackson, the famous Lee Jackson.
Hello. Apparently I'm famous. This is Lee Jackson, and I am from Angled Crown. We work with design agencies all around the world, converting their beautiful designs into powerful WordPress themes.
Powerful. And I'm the host of this. I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We specialize in learning management systems and general support and management of WordPress websites. That's what we get up to. So let's get into it, guys and girls. Let's get into these news stories. I thought, it's 8 years. It's taken 8 years, but in the end, they got around to it. The text widget, now you can embed images, shortcodes, everything it should have done. Anybody wants to kind of jump into that first story?
Well, it's the shortcode part that's new, because they had added the rich text editor last time, and this is sort of the sequel to the. Oh, there were some issues with the text widget when with the new text widget. So then we had to introduce a new HTML widget. And now finally we've decided that, well, if we want to make the text widget basically just like the post editor, then we should just support the shortcodes natively instead of making you put, add something to your functions file, which, I think it is one of those sort of, not before time fixes, but a good thing to have, insofar as one has to cope with shortcodes.
I'm with you on the shortcodes there. I mean, it feels ridiculous that we actually had to put one line of code into our function file or into a plugin or whatever it was when they could have included it years ago. But I don't really know the backstory. I don't often use shortcodes anyway because I kind of don't like them. I'm not a snob about them, but I don't necessarily like them because when clients are trying to use shortcodes, they have no idea what they're doing. So for me, I don't really have much else to input onto this one.
Well, I expect eventually it's going to be the Gutenberg widget anyway.
Yep, exactly.
Just insert blocks.
That's the ironic part about this, is that it's where everyone is working on Gutenberg and block-based editors, that we're still filling in shortcode support in all of the places where it hasn't really been officially supported. So that's, I think,
then you just do a search replace and put block support in instead. Yeah, if it were so easy, right?
Right.
All right, so I got a thumbs down for that story. The panel was really enthusiastic. Well, I didn't even ask John if he had it. You're going to save this, John, or do you think I'll just get on to the next story, John?
Get on to the next one.
Oh, thank you, John. Right.
Like I said, slow news day.
Yeah. Well, oh God, I'm starting to get the abuse already. I knew I was going to get a fair bit on this.
Well, you know, Jonathan wasn't interested in any of the stories I suggested, so.
I didn't understand one of yours. I tried to read.
I couldn't even understand one of them, Sammy. It was above our pay level.
Oh, I can't understand. I still have no idea what WP Engine is talking about with it, that thing.
Because I thought I was thick.
No, that was written by somebody's, you know, I specialize in jargon marketer.
Well, I read it twice, and I thought to myself, well, you know, I suffer from a bit of dyslexia. It must be that. Because I can't understand a word of this dribble.
You got to put it in the show notes just for people to read it and see if anyone can actually decipher it.
Yeah, right. All right. On to the next one. WordPress 4.4 removes try Gutenberg. Call to action.
I have an opinion.
Go on.
Oh, go for it, Lee.
Go for it, Lee.
What a stupid idea that was.
The call to action or the removing it?
The call to action in the first place, because all of my clients would instantly go, oh, that sounds great. Click, install, break.
That only caused us a little bit of work, Lee. I sent out an email to over 60 people last week saying, this might be coming up. Don't touch that button. Don't touch it.
Yes, I mean, we want ordinary WordPress users to test Gutenberg, but not on their live sites.
Exactly.
I think it was the most ridiculous idea I've ever seen, and that's saying something. Whoever thought? Oh, it might have been JJ. Oh, sorry.
Looking for that, I think it was. No, I'm joking.
I mean, it was Mike. I mean, I made a comment in the Trek ticket that, like, I don't mind the idea of letting people know what's coming. I didn't really like that if WordPress is going to move that direction, that it was all Gutenberg specific. Like, I think if this is a thing that we want to start doing is like alerting people that new cool stuff is coming in WordPress, that we should own that a little bit better. Like, we should have a schedule for when we start letting people know what's coming, and we should give people the option to dismiss it one time and it goes away forever and not have it reappear with every single release. Like, I think that there's a way to do this that's maybe a little bit more elegant than what dropped in beta, but that's like what beta's for, kind of, is like, we've been working on a thing, put it in there, see what the reaction is, and then let's yank it out. And so it's actually kind of awesome that we're able to experiment a little bit with some kind of ideas like this, because if you think it's bad, you get feedback that it's bad, and then you pull it out right away and it's okay. So I have a feeling this will come back. I think it might have been the
marketing team that suggested this.
Is that...
We actually developed some of our, quite a few of our kind of upcoming sites are actually, we actually install beta for some of our clients in advance, not for live sites. But if we know there is an imminent release coming out of WordPress in the next few weeks, we're already running it on the beta version, because we want to know everything we're doing is actually going to work when it updates. Could you imagine what could have happened if that nag would have somehow like leaked through WordPress.com, where a bunch of .com users get a nag for Gutenberg when they're mostly getting redirected to the new dashboard and the Calypso interface also? There's just like interfaces and like recommendations all over the place that don't make any sense. Like, it could be really bad. So I think everyone gets like your guys' perspective of like, you have to shut this down like super early days, or people are going to click it and start breaking stuff. But it's gone, so it's like it never happened. Exactly. What happened? What?
Well, no, I'll give you. You know, it was beta, and actually, we don't allow automatic updates on the sites that we're maintaining. Because that's what they're hiring us for. So, but I just sent it out just as a warning in general. If they had any other sites that, for madness reasons, they weren't having us maintain for them. Which is really strange. But no, I could see it. But I didn't think, like you say, JJ, it wasn't the most elegant idea. So it's gone, isn't it? Sameness has returned to WordPress. Oh, has John got anything to say about this?
Just basically, the two types of clients I seem to have are the people who are editing stuff every day or every other day, and the people who rarely go in and edit at all. So they would either, be compelled to click on it and try it, or they would just not even, bother with it. So, but either way, I think it's good to remove the call to action to try it until we've got a finalized version of Gutenberg.
Yeah, because it's moving, to say the least. All right, on to the next one.
I've got a question.
Oh, good. You got a question, have you, Lee? Right.
John James looks clever. So I want to ask him this on Gutenberg. Like I've read so many news articles recently about React not being used and all sorts of other stuff like that. Like, is it all back on track now? Are we all using React and it's like going to rock up in a few months' time, or is it still a bit?
The primary code base right now is still using React, but there is a version of it that uses Vue.
Yep.
And so it's built to be like agnostic in a way. I mean, JavaScript kind of allows for that as long as it's architected in ahead of time that way. And I think that it could go either direction. And there is like completely outside of Gutenberg, there is somewhere on the web that I don't remember, like there is a consortium of like front end frameworks that's starting to form to try and make sure that all of these React, Preact, Vue, all similar libraries have interoperability. So in theory, you could pick the one that you want and it wouldn't even make a difference in how the application would function. There's a company that's somewhat local to me and developers that build a framework called Ionic. And so they invented a piece of technology. I think it's called Stitch, but they built it. They built it as a to identify this problem of like people are writing a bunch of JavaScript and they have a bunch of weird front end choices that they have to make, and then everyone expects them to compile down into some like pseudo native web wrapper UI thing. And with their framework, they see someone uses Angular, someone uses React, someone uses Vue, someone uses something else. But then the expectation is that it all still bubble up and work. And it's impossible unless there is some other middleware to shape it all together. So in theory, other smarter, more dedicated resources are like trying to solve the problem outside of like spiritually, which one do you pick? And license-wise, which one do you pick? And, Facebook, do you love them or hate them? Hopefully that's kind of a non-issue if the consortium thing really pulls through. So everything is still going ahead with React. I don't think that that's the wrong choice as it is, but I am comforted by the fact that there is some other people that are solving the middeware problem. Hope that was a clever enough answer.
It was very clever.
Yes, I think it's important. I'm glad to know that there are people who are sort of working on other versions in case that's necessary. Because, I heard people speculating on, oh my God, basically everything is stopped. And it's like, no, I follow that core editor on Slack. Nobody took a breath.
Yeah.
People just kept building.
Yep. And that's good and bad, I guess, right? Like you don't want people to be too distracted by something that doesn't really super dictate how you write the code. But at the same time, it's an important deal. Licensing is, as we shape our businesses around not just WordPress, but our own products and our own clients and everything else. Like if you don't know what little license part is hooked in there, then you could be setting yourself up for, trouble later. So it's good that we're all learning how to care a little bit more about it. But I agree. There are people whose jobs it is to care immensely about these things. And so hopefully we're able to trust them and not worry about it too much.
Rightio. No problem. On to my next poorly selected story. A new theme experience in Customizer. Anybody want to pass any comment on that poor selection of a story?
It's pretty. I'm not sure. I don't use the customizer that much, and I don't use the theme browser that much either. So, it looks like if you are a theme developer, there are maybe some things you should pay attention to here. And that it will probably be a nicer experience for a lot of end users who, I've installed WordPress, let me look for something, versus, you're starting out and you've already, chosen these kinds of things and are setting them up.
Anybody else? Well, I just hate Customizer in general. I just We can eat the piece of crap. But there we go. That's my view on it.
I don't hate it. It's, you know, there are places where it's more and less useful, but, you know, it's just those of us who've, you know, been around a while, just never got into the habit of using the customizer because it wasn't there yet.
Right. I would agree. I think the one thing that was nice about WordPress in the early days was you got to dip into WP admin, make your edits, and then dip back out and see the site. Like, it wasn't like you lived in WP admin necessarily all the time. The customizer is sort of that inside of WP admin again. Like, we keep building these layers of like, well, we'll dip into the customizer, we'll tweak something, and then we'll dip back out. And so there's something familiar about the customizer that I really like, and Weston is awesome. Everyone that works on it is really great. But I agree. I like writing the theme and the code and making, like, I'm building a thing, and I don't really think about the customizer all that much. So I think when we redesign BuddyPress and bbPress.org, though, I really want to like use as much native WordPress stuff as possible, because we end up with a whole bevy of like plugins and extra theme and weird code that hooks in and does all this fancy stuff. And we shouldn't have to do that anymore. Like, we should be able to take like a really powerful WordPress theme, something that's really cool that everyone really likes, and then be able to tweak it and customize it and use the tools that we're building to like run our own websites. If we can't do that, I feel like we're sort of failing ourselves and everybody else. So I really want to double down on using like native functionality wherever we can.
That makes a lot of sense to me. It's been a while since I looked at BuddyPress, but somebody in my meetup just mentioned that she'd been, you know, setting it up to build a community on a nonprofit website.
Awesome.
And, you know, they're planning to launch soon and see if anyone shows up. They're like, you maybe wanted to test whether people were interested in getting involved that way before you did all that.
It's true. That is the hardest part of every single BuddyPress site, even like multi-site, which I know we'll talk about later, but you gotta.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of community site, and I think it depends a lot on who your community is. But you know, I forget who I was talking to, but they were saying that, you know, they were trying to set these things up, and even on, you know, Facebook, where most people who aren't me are hanging out all the time, people weren't participating. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a matter of like the technologies. That wasn't what people wanted to do. And in other places, you'll find extremely lively, you know, forums or groups or communities or Slack channels or whatever. But I do know people who switched from trying to, you know, have a community area on their website to just saying, here, I'm going to create a Slack channel for, you know, people to hang out in. And
well, and that's the thing is, like, Slack has done a good job of like making idling okay. Like, you join a Slack channel and everyone's happy to see you. You like do the wave emoji. Everyone's like, oh, look, this person's here. That's great. And then like nothing happens. As for some reason, like that's okay. And then maybe you go back and forth a little bit, but then you end up like a member of 15 Slack networks. I don't know. Slack is capitalized on like the implementation part of it that I think maybe we haven't done with BuddyPress very well. But you're absolutely right. Getting people to show up is the hardest part of all of this. It's the hardest part. You could pay people and they won't show up, let alone like free will letting them show up whenever they want. So
there are some good success stories though with BuddyPress. I know we've kind of gone off topic, by the way, but you've got
well, that's the tradition of this show, isn't it?
Yeah. So, that never happens.
No, we've got Athletics Weekly, which they are rocking BuddyPress with, I'm pretty sure, thousands of members. So that's athleticsweekly.com. Quite very popular here in the UK, and that is bona fide out of the box BuddyPress and looks freaking awesome. I can hear you tap in there, Mr. John James Jacoby.
That's me. Yeah, I'm typing. I'm checking it out.
Can you also do me another favor? Can you say WP admin again?
WP admin?
No, you were like admin.
Admin. WP admin. Oh, WP admin. Yeah, I don't know why I said WP admin. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird that I say it that way. That's like, well, nobody's ever called me out for saying it like that.
Sorry, I'm the guy with the accent.
No, it's okay.
Well, yes, I think it's because he's a Brit, so he notices the way.
On the customizer, though. Oh, sorry. Carry on.
The other thing I say weird is sorry.
Sorry.
I don't know why. I don't know how I started doing that because I'm from Wisconsin, where everything is So I don't know what happened. Sorry, and WP admin. Yeah. Okay.
The customizer, though, going full circle, just pretending it's.
Yeah, try to go back onto the subject, Lee.
Yeah, even though it's more of a pear shape than a circle. But
please try that. Yeah.
The customizer itself, I used to hate it, but kind of love it. Everything we build now. I mean, we've got this SaaS solution that we do for event companies as well. So everything we do is on multi-site, but we do a lot with the customizer because clients really like having that kind of organized section where they can go into the header and change everything and look at it and see it there live and it's happening. And then if they're not happy with things, they just cancel and start again, or they save their progress. And they really like that. I still don't like it, and I don't know why clients like it, but because it's out of the box WordPress and it's a few lines of code to add just another option into the customizer, we stopped using about 3 years ago ACF options and moved everything over to the customizer. So although I'm not the biggest fan of it, because it's WordPress and it's core and it's supported and it's easier to administer and look after, we just went full customizer. So I'm not surprised to see themes in there, and as long as you can't edit posts in there in the future, because that would kill me. I prefer Gutenberg.
Right.
So
I think that being able to save customized themes as like drafts, like being able to go through, make some changes, and then save them and not launch the site, makes the customizer like a thing that we can really start to invest really, really heavily in. Because up until now, you kind of told people not to touch it because they could really dork the site up pretty quickly without really trying. So now in theory, someone can make a user role that only allows them to save theme tweaks as a draft, and they can say, hey, I want it to look more like this. And you can log in as an admin and go, oh, that's a good idea. Let's deploy that. Let's hit publish, and then it'll go. Like up until now, that wasn't even possible. So I think we'll see like a world of flexibility. Yep.
Now, John, what do you think? Please support me, John.
As far as the theme preview moving into the customizer, I think that is a good move. I think it's solid because I think that's one thing that's lacking is the way that it is now is when you go to activate a new theme, you're not really sure how it's going to look. But I think that this will be a big improvement. And one thing that I took away from this article as well is that if you are running a multi-site and you have a bunch of themes installed, performance-wise, this is going to be a substantial improvement. So I think that's a positive.
That was a point I forgot about. Thanks for pointing that out. I just want to clarify things. I do agree with what you were saying, JJ, about a unified interface. And I think the basic concept of customizer is totally... I would support it. I've just find the implementation. I can't talk again. Good. The basic setup at the present moment, I just personally find it very clunky. I just find the UX interface when I do go occasionally to use it. I just find there's something about it that I personally find really clunky, but it could be just personal taste driven. That's something which one person's opinion you definitely can't listen to, and definitely not mine.
Right. Some parts are better than others, right? I don't like attempting to do widget management or menu management because there's like moving stuff around in that narrow panel is just a pain in the patootie. Although I think both widget management and menu management need a tune-up regardless. But for other things like, add your logo here, put your site icon in, change some of your colors, and the ability to preview it right away is nice.
I like that the customizer, and I mean, a lot of people won't like this, but the way that Weston and everyone is doubling down on improving the customizer with like every single WordPress release is something that we haven't seen in WordPress, I think, in a long time. Like that momentum of a dedicated group of people that are iterating repeatedly, release over release over release on something is really refreshing because most of the time it's like big feature, ship it in a major version, and then it drops and it's in there, and then everyone moves away from it. And the customizer has seen like continual improvements and iterations and feature adds, release over release over release, which is super, super refreshing.
Yeah, I think to remark about what Sally, I think that's one of the reasons why I resist it. It is this narrow panel. I think if it was full width, more room for it, more kind of scope for UX, I think it would. My feelings towards it would be a bit more warmer, but like I say, that's personal taste, isn't it? Nobody's going to remark on that.
I think that is a problem for some of the things that they're trying to do in the customizer, and other of them work well. I mean, I have used the, add your CSS thing in the customizer to quickly test stuff, but writing CSS in something that's this wide, it's not really a very good experience. So if it's more than something very small, I'm as likely to want to test it somewhere else.
And
but
I also feel for a real newbie, I think one of its purposes was to make it a lot easier. And I take what JJ said about, and he's totally correct, compared to having things all over the place, which that is a growing tendency. You find settings everywhere. To have it in one coherent UX interface is great. But my experience with newbies is that I think after they've used it a few times, they do tend to like it a lot. But they also struggled initially just as much in working out what it's about as some of the more traditional mythologies. That's my experience. But
I think with any new technology, some people will double down on it real hard and put everything in the customizer. And then it freaks people out, and then some people are turned off by it. And then some people will avoid it inherently. And then after a few years, when you realize, like, oh, this is becoming useful, this is something that I should pay more attention to, whatever else, everything kind of evens out in the end. And the customizer is it's still very WordPress in that there is a strict, purposeful separation between the stuff that you're working on in writing and what's happening on the front side of the site. And so if the customizer is the evolution of a front-end editor, I think there's some psychological benefit to slow rolling an idea. Okay, everything happens on the theme side now. I think if we dropped that, or if the world had that it's too drastic of a shift. The people that already want that are trying that out on Squarespace or on a site builder type website, and but the 40 million or whatever sites, 28% of the web isn't. If you dropped a front side editor on them, themes wouldn't have 100% support for it. There'd be a bunch of breakage all over the place, and it would just be too much change too quickly. So I think if the customizer is the way to creep on that idea. And I don't know that it is, but to me, it kind of seems like it is. It could be worse, I guess.
Yeah, I think that you've opened a whole other area, which if you decide to come back, JJ, we can discuss. I think we're going to go for our break, folks, and we'll be back in a few moments, and we'll be delving in how to use multi-site on a kind of beginner, developer level with our great panel. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back, folks. We've had a great news discussion. We're going to delve now into multi-site. Lee's getting ready. He's getting his clobber on. He's always doing a runner. So, multi-site. It's not something... Pardon.
There it is. Nice.
Right,
I like it.
God, he looks... But he looks a bit frightened today, actually. He's been to the dentist yesterday. I think he's brought out in the other side.
It was this morning. That's how dedicated I am to this podcast.
Right, yeah.
So this is like the post-root canal, Lee. Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
why I'm so grouchy.
But I had a similar treatment yesterday, Sally.
Oof.
Ongoing. I've actually I no longer live at home, Sally. I just live at my dentist.
You've just moved into the dentist's office. That doesn't sound
He's got
like
all
much
my
fun.
money now, Sally. I can't afford anything because he's actually got all my money now.
I feel like
He's
talking
put a new story on his house.
Yeah, exactly.
talking about dentistry and multi-site in the same week. You guys are champions.
We're not known to go off topic at all, Jojo. Not at all.
Is that multi-site's new slogan? Is like WordPress multi-site better than dental work?
I hope some people would
Sold.
disagree with that, JJ. Right. I just want to get a quick outline where I would like the conversation to go. Obviously, the panel will take absolutely no notice of what I'm just about to say. I just thought a quick outline on what multi-site is, what it's good for, what it might not be good for, and then some resources, some areas that you found that in your own experiences tripped you up a little bit. I think that would be a great resource to our listeners. I don't know if the rest of the panel agree with that, but I thought I'd give a quick outline. And would JJ like to start off the conversation?
I'll start the pitch statement because I want to hear more from y'all how you use it and or maybe don't always love using it. But myself, Jeremy Felt, and a few others help maintain the WordPress multi-site component. So multi-site is a feature within WordPress. It used to be like the original fork of WordPress. It was WordPress MU. You had a multi-site install of WordPress and you had a single site install of WordPress. And so when I found WordPress, I found multi-site first. I didn't know there was even a single site option. It was multi-site. And so I have a special place in my heart for it. And where WordPress single site had the famous 5-minute install, WordPress multi-site had the famous 5 install minimum. Because you could never.
At least that's what I've been told.
You could never really get it working the way you wanted to until after you had like installed it and reinstalled it and installed it again a few times. And so at this point, I would say the most common example of a good WordPress installation, aside from WordPress.com, is educational. Any place that is a college or a school that needs multiple sites for maybe an alumni site or specific classes or the front-facing site plus some private sites. You see it in places where there is a need to run multiple WordPress sites, but because they're all running the same code underneath means that there needs to be some type of overlap between the themes that they're running, the plugins that are active, and all that jazz. And so there are some like technical differences underneath the hood in multi-site that help it be possible and help it run in an efficient kind of way. But above and beyond that, multi-site offers all sorts of different weird kind of concepts like domain mapping, we call it, but it's like site aliasing, which is how you have a top-level domain like jjj.blog actually is living on WordPress.com or whatever. So being able to rewrite and redirect different things in different ways is really nice. And then one of the things that I like to talk about, which I think makes multi-site more valuable to more people, is there's a built-in sort of hidden piece of functionality that no one talks about and few people use, but we've used on WordPress.org and .com for multiple networks of sites. And so it's just like grouping sites together, but in the way that WordPress.org is one network, and then there is make.wordpress.org and a bunch of sites there is another network, and then BuddyPress.org is another network, and bbPress.org is another network. And so there are ways to group sites together, but you have the same users all in the middle. And so networks traditionally are like different domains, but you still have some shared code base amongst all of them. And so the nice thing about it is you only have one code base to work with. So you're not updating 50 WordPresses all the time. You update one WordPress, and all of these sites get that update for yourself. So it's sort of a thing that a lot of people misuse or use incorrectly, or they try out and it isn't really for them, and that's totally 100% fine. But for the people who want multi-sites or multiple sites and networks, it really is a super, super cool, extremely useful feature to have built into WordPress core.
It is. Lee, but it has a bit of a reputation, doesn't it, as being a bit of a beast, doesn't it? Is it lack of knowledge, or are there some, I understand it's improved over the past 18 months considerably, the installation, but are there still things that catch people out, Lee, do you think? That?
Well, we've used it as an agency. I've used it across 2 agencies for, I would say, 4 years in production environments. And maybe 4 years ago, it was a little bit complicated at times, but I can only mainly remember 2 headaches that I may have had. It's actually been a complete breeze for 4 years. So I'm surprised that people, I mean, I suppose for people who don't understand the concept of what multi-site is, then perhaps it's confusing. You know, I'll have clients who get added to one of the accounts and can't work out why they can't see any of the other sites in the drop down. So there's usability issues when people don't understand how multi-site works. But I guess because we've been exposed to it on a daily basis for 4 years and know it like the back of my hand. I don't actually know the back of my hand very well. I don't know why people say that, but I know it really well. So, and I've never had problems with clients other than that one thing. Why can't I see my sites in the drop down? And then I get lazy and install hyperadmins, which is terribly ancient, and I should stop doing that.
Yeah, is there also the hosting requirements of running it? Are they a lot, you know?
Yeah, that could get more complicated because if you're using, say, like a shared hosting and that, and you won't have a fixed IP. It's much nicer if you're doing things like domain mapping to have a fixed IP so that everyone can essentially point at their domain at that fixed IP, and then WordPress does the rest. If you don't, you have to then start doing things like mapping of the domain inside of cPanel or whatever else, and that's where it can get complicated and people get stressed out.
Yeah, go on, Sally.
I've been through all that domain mapping stuff. So, you know, I mean, multi-site intrigued me immensely from the time I first heard about it. And I remember, you know, I believe it was WordPress 3.0 when they merged the code base in. And I remember hearing, actually, I think it was on the WP Tavern podcast, you know, the suggestion that, you know, the reason that it was probably a good thing that you needed to actually put some code in order to activate multi-site, because if you didn't know what you were doing, it was maybe better not to have access to it. And I think that there are ways when you set things up to make it easier than that. But I was one of the people who really kind of used it for the wrong thing. You know, I had a bunch of different sites. I was tired of having to update stuff. You know, this was before you could get something like, you know, manage WP or sync and just update all of your sites. I was tired of updating stuff. So I thought, look, they're all my sites. I'll just put them into a multi-site. But the thing was, you know, they all had different themes. They all had different plugins. So, you know, that wasn't a great use case. It's you know, something's much better. I was doing a little CSS work the past couple of days on a church website. And it's a multi-site installation where basically, you know, it's one church, but all of their locations in the state each have a subsite. And that's, you know, where you want a consistent design and a shared set of plugins available. You want some control over, you know, what people can and can't install and manage. And you want to, you know, you want it to work well. And you may want a shared user base, then, you know, it's really good for that. And I think, yeah, it is partly, I mean, as with WordPress itself, understanding the concept. You know, I have a lot of clients who are confused because understanding the concept of a content management system where the idea is you manage your content in one place and you display it in a bunch of different places. And that's why there are things like, you know, widgets and this and that, because we want to save you the effort of retyping this stuff every single place that you want to put it.
Multi-site has a weird, interesting name too, because other open source projects like Django and Drupal, the other word for this is multi-tenant. So tenancy is usually the technical jargon for this, where when people hear multi-site, multi-site is sort of a very opinionated take on sites and site tenancy, where you usually do want to have global users. You usually do want to have a global code base. And if those two things are like not requirements for you, then multi-site is probably not the thing you want. And you can even do like a pseudo, like you're talking about, like you can do global users without multi-site. There is code underneath WordPress that let you share users across multiple WordPress sites if that's a thing you wanted to do. And there is a way now with many hosts and many services to have a sort of global deployment of one code snapshot that gets pushed out to multiple servers all the time, even in single site mode. So the need for multi-site has shifted as single site services have really come and made having multiple WordPress sites much, much easier than it used to be.
Yeah, it's great. Before I go and ask John if he's got any experiences with multi-site, I just want to get back to the hosting, because our experience with dealing with some clients on multi-site is that you do need some performance enhancement when it comes to hosting. You need either something like WP Engine or a virtual private server set up. You need something that's got a little some reasonable horsepower, because otherwise you do get into some performance issues. John, have you got any experience with multi-site at all?
Very, very limited, so I can't really, speak to a lot of these things. Most of the sites I deal with are single installs, so I'm just kicking back and listening. So.
Oh, right.
Yeah, well, I ran my multi-sites on shared hosting, but none of them had a ton of visitors or users, or so as with anything, it kind of depends on how. I wouldn't have tried to create my own blog network on shared hosting, but.
The thing is, performance it's the same with single site or multi-site. The things that you would do to tune it are pretty much identical. There's more you could do with multi-site if you wanted to, but you want caching, you want object caching, query caching, you want to use Memcached or Varnish or Redis or whatever. These are all the same things. The only thing that you can choose to do with multi-site that is a little bit more difficult to do with a single site install is split the database up into parts. And so if you do have lots of sites and you want to offload global tables into one and move some site tables into another, and you can start moving stuff around with plugins like HyperDB or my fork of LudicrousDB. But for the most part, hosting companies have solved these problems before. And if we use the educational example, a lot of schools run their multi-site instance on just one server sitting at the school on a static IP. And Washington State University, Jeremy Felt, they have something like 1,200 sites and 7 networks of sites, or 14 networks of sites, because every school, every teacher gets a site. They all have landing sites. They all have dedicated portal sites and everything, but it runs on one server. So it really does depend on how much traffic you've got and how you've tuned the server to work. And so if you have no traffic, then shared hosting is fine. Like that's always like the typical WordPress thing. If nobody's visiting you, then you're serving no pages. But the more pages that you have to serve and how tuned that server is will determine what your needs are, single site or multiple sites or a multi-site.
Yep, that's great. You pointed out. So Lee, go on, Lee. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say there's a really cool use case for multi-site that people may or may not be aware of. And we do this, and the idea is the WordPress administration area is quite a nice interface, and you can use tools like advanced custom fields to create custom fields. You can create post types, so you can very quickly create a back office solution of some sort for clients. if that's successful for them, so for example, we've got a few basic CRMs in certain niches that works really well. They can track their contacts, they can track opportunities and all those sorts of things. And we're using WordPress post types, we're using custom fields, and then some logic that we've written in a plugin. It's a really nice, lightweight, really rapid application development using WordPress as a framework. You can then fire that up inside of Multisite, and you've instantly got the ability to offer people around the world access to their very own CRM system using advanced custom fields, a little bit of plugin code, and WordPress Multisite, and maybe Admin Columns Pro as well, because that allows you to do some really cool filtering. And you've got an incredibly easy to build, easy to support software as a solution application that people around the world can use. So we've done that both ways. We've even done it where we've actually created a front-end version that people can log in.
Nice.
So instead of using the WordPress interface in the admin, they're actually using the front end. They're using a special theme that we've created, and people would not know that the entire thing was powered by WordPress. So Multisite, I am like just a crazy fan of.
Yeah,
freaking brilliant.
That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool. That was the early days of BuddyPress. It was multi-site only.
Yeah.
And every user had a site, and most of their data was stored in that site, which is like a logical way to do this. Like the numbers on WordPress.com were pretty staggering, where more than 99.9% of users on WordPress.com only had one site. And so in a way, you can pretty much guarantee that, like, mentally people say, I am my site. Like, I blog here. This is where my stuff lives. But eventually the evolution of that is people do want to grow a network, and they want the network to not be married to a specific site or a blog, and they want it all to be separate. And so BuddyPress has evolved and changed to be single site friendly and all those things over the years. But yeah, the one thing that with global users, to your point, is users get instant partitioning, instant separation, where you get roles and capabilities per site. I don't have access to your site. You don't have access to mine. I invite people to mine. You invite people to yours. There's no overlap, but you can choose who you invite in to each individual site for what reason. So that's nice to have that built in out of the box. And it's not super easy to maintain all that code. So there's a lot of attention that goes into making sure that continues to work right, release over release. So
thank you, multi-site gods.
So if you're kind of think the project is suitable for multi-site and you've never used it before, are there any good kind of resources that you could suggest that people go to learn more about it?
I will jumpstart straight ahead. Like, there's a bunch that are pretty obvious. You search the web and you'll find all sorts of documentation and resources. But Jeremy Felt on GitHub has open sourced all of the code that they use to super trick out Washington State University's website. So I think it's wsu.edu is their URL, but on the Washington State University GitHub repo is like 5 years, I think, at this point, of documentation about how they've really tricked out multi-site specifically for like educational purposes and uses. And so for people who want to like really see what multi-site is capable of doing, like, you will eventually end up at Jeremy Felt's Washington State University repository. Up until learning about it to that endpoint, search the web is my recommendation. There's like other, like the folks at WPMU Dev have really concentrated on having lots of multi-site specific documentation and plugins. And
now, what do you think of their documentation in general, JJ?
Oh, it's good. The folks at InkSub and WPMU Dev they built their entire business around multi-site. I mean, lots of their plugins are very single site specific. They're a for-profit company that started with like student and alumni websites as part of their original business model. So they care about multi-site specifically, and they have always put out a bunch of like really good documentation. But multi-site in recent months, I think what Lee was kind of alluding to, and over the course of probably the past 2 years or so, we've really put in a lot of like hidden performance improvements and little tweaks for developers who want to like really get the most out of it and query from multiple sites in different ways and really separate networks in other ways. And so there's a lot that could still be documented that probably isn't super public yet. But those are the I feel like I'm missing one. There's like, oh, well, the folks at Web Dev Studios talk a lot about multisite. They use multisite for most of their projects also. So they do a lot of really cool case studies on how they've used multisite to do different types of things.
Yeah, the reason I was asking, JJ, is that, you know, obviously you can go to the web, but you can also kind of waste a lot of time reading stuff that isn't the best quality, and it can actually put off some people. And the reason why it wasn't working for them was that they were reading stuff that people were producing wasn't correct.
I have a very far-fetched idea that is somewhere in the core WordPress track, where I think it would be neat if WordPress was multi-site by default.
Right.
Like maybe you don't expose the ability to create new sites right off of the bat, but the subdirectory, subdomain pick that you used to have to do isn't really that big of a problem anymore. And the performance improvements that multi-site gets with querying for users and other different little things, if you could just easily spin up a second or a third or a fourth site, or you just hide it in general, it's like one of those weird WordPress features that I don't like, that it's hidden, it's tucked away. You have to learn about it, you have to discover it. It means you have to have probably done it wrong a few times. Like everyone comes into multi-site like, oh, I wish I would have known about this sooner. And then you get to it. Now you have to do all this rework to merge all your sites together.
I wish it would get more love in general. I mean, it seems like, you know, you don't see a ton of multi-site improvements in new releases, or you know, hear that much discussion about it, and you know, that seems to be a pity. It needs better press.
Yep, it does. It does need better press. The few tweaks that have gone in they're largely technical, because the audience of people that are really flexing multi-site muscle is very, very small still. But I think it's small by design, and I question that design at this point. WordPress 3.0 was a long time ago, and web hosts have come a long way. They're all beefier. They're all using PHP 7. It's faster. What it might look like if everyone just had multiple subdomains or directories, just spin up multiple sites whenever they wanted to without having to go through the rigmarole of activating it and turning it on. Plus, then we would really truly only have one code base to maintain, because right now when you activate multi-site, this is why it's a problem, because you can't. Once you activate multi-site, you can't go back. You can't really easily unactivate multi-site, because it runs a bunch of database queries to modify the users table and update this table, and this works differently than that when multi-site is on versus off. And so there are there's probably 250 different places where if it's multi-site, do this, and if it's single site, do this other thing. Well, that's really exhausting to maintain over time. And so it works, and it's in there, and it's nice that it's in there, but it would be easier on everyone if it was just one code base on by default. And I don't know. I think it would be interesting to see.
That's certainly a good point.
Yeah, I do. Sorry.
And it goes back to what you were saying about the, you know, how it being unusual that the customizer is something that has shown continuous improvement since its inception, because multi-site is definitely one of those areas where that hasn't been true.
One of the things about multi-site historically is when it was a fork of WordPress in the early days, it was really just one person that was working at Automatic that was maintaining multi-site. It eventually turned into Ron Rennick, myself, a few others were like really helping with code review and merging from single site to multi-site, and then it would just get pushed and merged to WordPress.com. But it was just one person who was building the majority of it. So when you look at the multi-site code base, you really get a good look at like the inside of one person's mind, like some of the problems they had to solve and the decisions that they had to make and the way that things got named. And you look at it and you think to yourself, like, boy, if this was built by a team of dedicated engineers, would it have turned out differently? Would it have solved different problems in a different way? And what if multi-site was a plugin instead of being pushed into core? Would it have Gutenberg style been iterated on more quickly and adapted more frequently by others instead of it being baked in where everyone's afraid to work on it and break WordPress.com or something else? Like the history of how things got put in and how we ended up to where we are, I think is really interesting. But in the end of the day, we are where we are. And so this is what we have to work with. And I think if this is what we have, we should really, try and treat it nicer or, be more respectful to the legacy that it comes with. So,
yeah, that was one of the reasons why I thought I would discuss the topic really, JJ, and thanks for coming on the show, because I had some concerns about the discussion, because it's not like I say, it's area I leave to a couple of developers that work for me. But one of the reasons why I brought it up, JJ, because a couple of months, or more than a couple of months ago, time flies, is that I had a kind of bit of an informal discussion with a state. I live in Nevada, and I had a discussion with a director of a state department over coffee, and they're really big into Drupal, and he kind of semi-dismissed WordPress, that it was a blogging platform and it couldn't run multiple sites. And I said, well, I don't really agree with that. Obviously, you have your point of view. I'll put it very in milder terms than that. I said, you should go and have a look at multi-site, and he hadn't even heard of it. He had no knowledge of it at all. And I think there's a lot of people in IT departments of institutions that are a bit like that, aren't they, JJ?
I think so too, and it's and rightfully so. They have other stuff to worry about other than the CMS that is going to run the website. They're worried about 50 million other things in any given day, and so the conversation to convince someone that this hidden gem is really the thing that everything should be architected and built around is a tough sell. You need someone who can come in and speak to it and really pitch it as a feature. Someone has to champion it. Someone has to evangelize it. And if it was just built in, that would happen organically. Whereas right now it has to happen like very, very intentionally.
Well, I think we'll wrap it up now. I think we've had a pretty good discussion, and I'll make sure some of those links to the resources. I just wanted to check with JJ what you thought about some of the resources that Lee and himself.
I know for sure I'm forgetting really, really good ones, so I'm sorry to everyone.
I have a collection of bookmarks. I'll drop them in there.
Thanks for
drop them in the Slack.
Yeah, thanks. And I'll make sure they're in the show notes. Do have a look at it, have a play with it. Like what JJ, it tends to be missed out, but for the right circumstances, it's a powerful product. I'm just going to go quickly around the panel to. I'll start with Lee. Lee, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to and your videos?
Can you come back to me, because my computer is going nuts and everything?
Yeah, sure, no problem, Lee.
Sorry.
Let's start with our guest, JJ. No more about what you're up to, JJ.
Most of the code that I write and plugins that I work on are on GitHub at JJJ, or if you, I largely spend my time working with the security team or working on WordPress core or the BBs. So hosting companies sponsor me to work on core, and you could do so too at sponsorwp.com. I'm going to try and sell some add-ons, I think, for some of my plugins at pluginsloaded.com. I am sort of learning how to make money. So, if anybody has any pointers, I'm all ears. I just got back from BuddyPress, so my head is still full of business ideas from everybody else. So
I'm sure it is.
But that's where people can find me.
And also they can find you on a great podcast called what was it?
Yeah, the WordPress Weekly with everybody's friend Jeffro. So that's sort of new. It's about 6 months or 8 months in. But I wasn't going to go talking about that podcast on this podcast. That doesn't.
We don't mind. We have anybody. We have Lee. So
I
we
shamelessly plug mine all the time.
Shamelessly plugs his, but I've got no problem.
Well, thank you for the plug. I'm sure Jeff will appreciate that.
No, you've been doing a great job on the podcast. I've been really enjoying listening to both of you, and I think you've been doing a fantastic job, JJ.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lee sorted out his computer problems. So how can people get hold of you?
Right. Well, you can get hold of me on WPinnovator.com. Head on over there because the 100th episode is live today.
Oof. That's exciting. That's a big milestone. Congratulations. That's awesome.
A huge milestone.
Yeah, you did fantastic.
I went to the dentist on the same day. It's a bit depressing.
Well, and you won't get to add another digit until you have done 900 more episodes. So this is the reason to celebrate.
That's a great achievement. Fantastic news, Lee. Sally, how can people get hold of you?
Find me at WPFangirl.com, or I am at Sally Getch on Twitter, and the meetup is eastbaywp.com.
Oh, thanks. And John, how can people find you, John?
You can find me at my website, which is lockdowndesign.com, or follow me on Twitter or Facebook. Just look up Lockdown Design. Also want to say Lee didn't mention this, but he's got a YouTube channel that you should follow as well. So.
Yeah, he's doing great stuff there. I think you look out multiple videos each week, don't you, Lee?
Yeah, he's pumping them out. Jonathan, how do we get a hold of you?
Yeah, I think he's disappeared. I think he's gone back to his dentist, actually. It's quite thanks for that, John. It's really easy, folks. You can either go to the website, WP-Tonic. We have all the episodes and bonus content as well. You can get me on Twitter at Jonathan Denwood, or you can just use email at jonathan@wp-tonic.com. Any suggestions about guests, subjects is most welcome. And if you're feeling very generous, try and leave us a review on iTunes. It does really help the show. And we have had recently a few new reviews, which is great to read. Good or bad, I'm easy about whatever feedback you want to give. I just want to thank the panel. I thought it's been a great round table. I always enjoy the round table shows. And we'll see you next week at 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. You can watch the show live on Facebook, or there's a link to our Zoom if you want to ask the panel any questions. And we'll see you next week, folks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.